having what she says in South Africa.
So let's go. So how did this collaboration come about? Which one of you convinced the other to do this piece?
For me, it really was a byproduct of just talking with Joe cross-country on the phone, and the conversation, I moved it toward being about how creatively blocked I am these days and unable to draw. I said, well, when I come east, why don't we spend a couple of days drawing together, jamming, which is a tradition from underground comics where you start a drawing, somebody else continues it, and somehow a comic strip comes out of it. But pretty soon we began talking about Gaza because it was in the front of our brains, both of us for different reasons. Then Françoise heard us talking, said, stop. And then I'm her husband, I gotta stop. So the next thing she did was say, okay, I'll connect you through Zoom. And then whatever you're saying, it started to get interesting. Let's just have a transcription of what you're talking about. And so that is what we distilled down into being the 3-page comic strip.
And I flew out twice, and we spent each time 4 days together, basically working elbow to elbow, and listening to music, drawing, maybe deciding on how a panel should look, arguing a little about a couple of things.
Working together was genuinely fun, and I think looking on the page that it really can be seen as almost literally a conversation, as well as just being a record of a conversation.
I think we had an understanding of how to put things together. And I think if I was taking the dominant role in a panel, I'd leave space for you, and you do the same thing.
The fact you have your two characters or your two avatars drawn made the thing easier, I guess.
Well, as a conversation, sure.
It was a conversation, but the tone is different. You've got the punchlines, and Joe is much more questioning.
Joe's an interviewer by profession as well as a cartoonist. And
I don't think we were trying to get our personalities out, but I think naturally there was a different tone in I had a different tone from Art, but it sort of blended well together.
I agree.
One of the first things we see in the first page is all those eyes gouged out. There's both the notion of revenge, an eye for an eye, but there's also the view of the event and history.
Yeah, you know, there's a thing in comics called the splash panel. And the splash panel is the one that gives you the feeling of the whole story before you begin and enter into it, something to attract you into the subject. And here it was natural to start this way because it was all about vengeance and counter-vengeance. And so an eye to an eye is one of the first things that came up with the Palestinians having their grievance that they were acting out on the 7th, and from the 8th or 9th on, it was Israel acting out. So it wasn't an eye for an eye, it was 1,000 eyes for an eye eventually. And so that was worth drawing. And having a picture that ends up having a kind of graphic poster-like quality is a good way into the head. On each of these pages, there's at least one image that holds you and gives the theme of the page.
There's a lot of sketches of Netanyahu in the exhibit.
That was one of the hardest things for me to do.
How difficult was it for you?
Impossible, because Netanyahu doesn't have a face. If you're on a subway, everybody, if they were all male, you just go, oh, there's a lot of Netanyahus around, you know. But to find the specifics, which is what caricature is about, is very difficult with him. He's fat, he's not fat, he's smiling, he's snarling, all at the same time. But he doesn't look distinguished. For me, he looks like a shoe salesman. With most public figures, after a week, the alpha cartoonists, the ones who specialize in caricature, figure out exactly how to draw Charles de Gaulle. So you know exactly what nose to make, what the expression has to be. I never saw that with Netanyahu. I looked online to see what other people drew when they were drawing Netanyahu. They don't look anything like each other. They don't really look like him. I think I counted 43 different little heads of Netanyahu before I settled on one. And even on the 43rd one, it wasn't quite looking right. And what I did was I took an overlay on top of one of the other sketches and colored it green. And as soon as it was his face green, it looked exactly like Netanyahu, because it's the color for monsters, like Frankenstein, things like that. So it was a long search to just get this little 1 inch of bristles covered.
Joe Sacco, does this war have a more personal or intimate dimension for you than for us who are merely witnesses?
I can't say how you or others feel about what's going on. I just know my own reaction to it. And Gaza holds a special place for me. I spent a lot of time there. People were very hospitable to me there. I did a whole book about what happened in Gaza in the 1950s and in the early 2000s, and I know a lot of those streets quite well. I stayed in the refugee camps. So seeing it all obliterated and seeing all those lives lost and lives ruined, yeah, it hit me very hard. So yeah, Gaza's sort of in my blood.
Very quickly on the first page, the question of names arises. Well, it's about naming things, and you're not afraid of words. You're not afraid to call a spade a spade.
What struck me was, I think originally I said, well, genocide in the balloon, and then I went back and went, no, I have a better idea. Genocide-ish, because then it's an adjective, and an adjective doesn't have the same concrete power as a noun. And so that felt to me like it's interesting, and it's kind of ironic and makes you think about what it means when you're saying genocide. Like, is it only a genocide when 6 million are killed? Or if 1 million, is it still genocide or genocide-ish? How about 1,000?
Do you share this point of view, Joe?
I totally understood Art's point, and it's from his perspective. To me, it was clear it was a genocide from day 2, basically because the bombing was so heavy right away, and Netanyahu began making references to the Bible and the wiping out of an entire people on the orders of God in the Bible. So I thought, okay, he's signaling that this is going to go beyond an eye for an eye, or even 1,000 eyes for an eye. It's some form of retribution that is going to veer into genocide. And very quickly, too, other Israeli politicians and media people stepped up and said basically the same thing, some version of the same thing. And so to me, it was a genocide right away.
There's no mention of either Biden or Trump in this comic. Why is America kept out of the picture in this one?
Because it's omnipresent as two people living in America talking about this situation. To go off on a rant about Trump is 5 books worth of venom in order to be able to phrase it. And it would have been a very different strip just to go, look at that fat fuck, or he wants the Nobel Peace Prize, all he gets is the pizza prize, not the Peace Prize. So it's he's an easy target, and it's easy to miss the only point that's really important here, which is we're subsidizing this monstrous crime.
And you have to remember, we were doing this strip during the Biden administration.
Right.
And so really the point is, in a way, there's just the continuity of American policy in the Middle East vis-a-vis Israel and vis-a-vis the Palestinians. American policy is the problem.
Can we talk about the title, Never Again and Again and Again? And so by handling those white flags, do you think there's still a tiny amount of hope? Or is it totally desperate, this situation?
Well, I always see the glass as 3/4 empty rather than half full. So if there's hope, it's tiny. Like, I don't see how one gets all that toothpaste back into a tube.
The idea of never again should have a universal component. What the lesson should be is that this should not happen to anyone, and that's what we're trying to get across. It's surprising that phrase, never again, is it's controversial in a way. If you interpret it as a universal axiom, that should also pertain to the Palestinians, it becomes controversial in some circles, and it shouldn't. And that's why we're holding that flag, those flags.
Never again for anyone is clearly the only answer to never again, instead of, oh yeah, well, we'll get even with you guys, which is how it's been implemented.
And so who would be the bigger brains you're talking about?
I mean, even that's almost a cry of despair too. Are there any bigger brains than ours? I mean, I'm not saying we're the brightest bulbs in the room, but unfortunately, I don't think anyone's really working on this. When you see someone like Trump, this is not a brain that's working on this problem. This is someone who just wants to clear it off his deck, replace this, put in some buildings, change it around, and get a peace prize. I mean, it's about his narcissism. I wish there was someone you could say, okay, this person's got the right idea. I think there are good ideas out there, but who are the politicians pushing those good ideas? Now I don't know if there is any good idea. It's become such a zero-sum game. So the only hope is to keep a universal message alive. Obviously not for this time, but for the next again.
But it's a good question.
It is a good question.
If we find the bigger brain...
We'll let you know. We'll do another 3-page piece.